The desperate gambit, the rain hammered against the windows of Morrison and Associates like bullets against armor, matching the relentless assault on Victoria Hayes's professional reputation. She sat hunched over her laptop in the corner of the break room, pretending to review campaign proposals while her stomach churned with each cruel laugh echoing from the conference room. Poor Victoria still thinks she had a chance at the Henderson account. Derek Walsh's voice carried through the thin walls like poison gas. I had to explain to the client that she's been unstable since our breakup, crying in meetings, making emotional decisions, really unprofessional behavior. Victoria's fingers clenched around her coffee mug until her knuckles went white. 8 months. 8 months since she'd ended their toxic relationship, yet Derek continued his campaign of destruction with the persistence of a man possessed. His recent promotion to senior partner had only amplified his power to damage her career. Victoria, darling. Patricia Sterling materialized beside her table like a shark, sensing blood in the water, her sympathetic smile sharp enough to draw blood. I heard about the charity auction next Friday. Such a shame Derek will be there with his new fiancée from the accounting firm downtown. Victoria forced her face into what she hoped resembled composure. I'll be fine, Patricia. Thank you for your concern. Of course, sweetie. I'm sure you'll manage to find someone presentable to escort you. Maybe one of your cousins could help. Patricia's voice dripped with false concern. It would be absolutely tragic if the only single woman at the partners' table showed up alone. Again. After Patricia glided away on her cloud of malicious satisfaction, Victoria buried her face in her hands. The Morrison and Associates annual charity auction was 6 days away, the most important networking event of the year. The thought of facing Derek's smirking face while he paraded his young fiancée made her skin crawl with anticipated humiliation. That evening, Victoria found herself staring at her laptop screen in her cramped apartment, the cursor blinking mockingly in the search bar. The words felt foreign as she typed them: professional companion services, elite escort agencies, corporate event partners. Most profiles looked like amateur hour, generic photos and prices that screamed desperation. Then she saw him, Marcus Kane. The name itself sounded like expensive whiskey and old money. His photograph showed a man in his early 30s with penetrating blue eyes and perfectly styled dark hair. He wore a charcoal suit that screamed bespoke tailoring, standing with the casual confidence of someone who had never questioned his place at the top of the food chain. Sophisticated companion for corporate and social events, extensive experience in high-stakes business environments, available for galas, charity functions, and professional networking events. Rate $1,200 per evening. Victoria's finger hovered over the contact button. $1,200 was her entire month's grocery budget, but something about Marcus's profile whispered authenticity in an ocean of obvious pretenders. She typed with trembling fingers. Hello, Marcus. I require a companion for my firm's annual charity auction this Friday evening. The event begins at 7 and typically runs until midnight. Are you available? The response came within 20 minutes. Good evening, Victoria. I'm available Friday evening. Before we proceed, I'd prefer to meet in person to discuss expectations and ensure compatibility. Would tomorrow at 6 work? I suggest Café Noir on Madison Avenue. Victoria stared at the message. Most other profiles had simply requested payment details and pickup locations. Marcus wanted to meet first, like this was a legitimate business consultation, rather than her desperate attempt to salvage her dignity. She typed back, "Tomorrow at 6 works perfectly." As Victoria closed her laptop, she caught her reflection. In the darkened screen, her face looked determined and terrified in equal measure, like someone preparing to leap from a very high building. She had no idea that Marcus Kane would turn out to be the most dangerous man she'd ever met, or that by Friday night her entire world would be forever changed. The next 24 hours crawled by with agonizing slowness, each minute bringing her closer to a meeting that felt simultaneously like salvation and complete insanity. Dangerous Chemistry Café Noir exuded the kind of understated elegance that whispered old money and new power. Victoria arrived 10 minutes early, clutching a leather portfolio and wearing her most professional navy blazer. She had spent hours researching Marcus Kane online and found absolutely nothing beyond his companion profile, which should have been her first red flag. At precisely 6 o'clock, the cafe door opened and Victoria's breath caught like a trapped butterfly. Marcus Kane was devastatingly handsome in person. Tall and commanding, with shoulders that belonged in architectural magazines, he moved through the cafe with the fluid precision of someone who had never doubted his right to own any room he entered. His navy suit was clearly custom-tailored, molded to his frame, with a precision that spoke of serious wealth. When his blue eyes found hers across the crowded cafe, Victoria felt something electric shoot down her spine like lightning. "Victoria," he said, approaching her corner table. With a smile that could have melted glaciers, his voice was rich velvet, with undertones of authority that made her pulse quicken. "Yes, that's me." She stood to shake his hand, surprised by the firm warmth of his grip and the way her heart hammered against her ribs at the contact. Marcus settled into the chair across from her with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in upscale environments. Victoria noticed how other patrons glanced his way, drawn to something indefinable about his presence that screamed power and success. "Thank you for meeting me," Victoria began, opening her portfolio with hands that barely trembled. "I have all the details about Friday's event. The Morrison and Associates annual charity auction is at the Metropolitan Hotel. Cocktails begin at 7, followed by dinner and silent auction bidding." Marcus nodded, his attention completely focused on her words, with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "What exactly do you need from me?" Heat crept up Victoria's neck. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend. Nothing inappropriate, just convincing enough that my colleagues believe we're in a serious relationship. There's someone at work who's been systematically destroying my reputation, and I need him to see that I've moved on successfully." "An ex-boyfriend," Marcus said. "It wasn't a question. Derek Walsh. He's been telling everyone that I'm emotionally unstable, that our breakup left me unable to function professionally. It's cost me 3 major clients and a promotion I earned twice over." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying, her face with an intensity that made her feel like he was cataloging every detail. "Tell me about him." For 30 minutes, Victoria found herself sharing more than she had intended. She told Marcus about Derek's manipulation tactics, his public humiliation campaigns, and how his lies about her mental state had poisoned her relationships with key clients. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions that showed he was analyzing every strategic detail. "We need a believable backstory," Victoria said, consulting her notes. "I thought we could say we met at a corporate networking event 6 months ago. You're in investment banking, which explains why you travel frequently and haven't met my colleagues." Marcus's smile held secrets that made her stomach flutter with dangerous anticipation. "Investment banking. Interesting choice. Which firm?" "Goldman Sachs," Victoria said quickly. "You specialize in mergers and acquisitions for mid-sized companies." "And how did I win your heart?" Marcus asked softly, his blue eyes holding hers, in a way that made her forget this was supposed to be pretend. Victoria felt her cheeks burn. "You're intelligent, respectful, and you don't try to control my career decisions like Derek did. You support my ambitions and treat me as an equal partner." "That sounds like a man worth loving," Marcus said quietly, and something in his voice, made the fictional relationship feel dangerously real. They spent another hour crafting their imaginary romance, discussing Victoria's job and what Marcus could expect at the charity auction. But throughout their conversation, details nagged at her consciousness like splinters under her skin. Marcus knew about Morrison and Associates' recent merger discussions without being told. When Victoria mentioned that CEO Patricia Sterling would be attending, something shifted in his expression, recognition perhaps, or calculation. He asked specific questions about the firm's client acquisition strategies that seemed far too informed for casual curiosity. Most unsettling of all, when the check arrived, Marcus paid with a platinum American Express card that caught the light like polished metal. Victoria glimpsed his name etched in elegant script, but the card itself was the kind reserved for people with unlimited credit limits and serious financial power. "Marcus," Victoria said as they prepared to leave, "can I ask you something?" Of course. Have you done this before? The escort work, I mean." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes unreadable as storm clouds. "Not exactly. It's more of a favor for someone who runs the agency. I don't typically take clients." "Then why are you doing this?" "For what I'm paying you." Marcus's smile was enigmatic enough to hide a dozen dangerous secrets. "Consider it a significantly discounted rate for a worthy cause." As they stepped onto Madison Avenue, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was hiding something massive. His clothes were too expensive, his mannerisms too refined, and his knowledge too extensive for someone who occasionally worked as a paid companion. "I'll pick you up at 6:30 Friday, Marcus said, hailing a taxi with the casual authority of someone accustomed to being instantly obeyed. "Text me your address and any other details I should know about the event." As Victoria's taxi pulled away, she looked back to see Marcus standing on the sidewalk, checking his phone with the posture of a man who commanded empires. Even when he thought no one was watching, he radiated the kind of power that made people step aside and pay attention. Victoria spent the ride home trying to convince herself that her suspicions were just pre-event nerves, that Marcus was simply a sophisticated man who had fallen on temporary hard times. But deep in her chest, intuition whispered that there was far more to Marcus Kane than he was revealing. The question was whether his secrets would save her career or destroy what remained of her professional reputation entirely. Part 3. Secrets. Unraveling. Friday evening arrived with Victoria's nerves stretched to their breaking point. She chose an emerald green dress that hugged her curves without screaming for attention, paired with her grandmother's diamond earrings and a clutch that had cost more than she cared to remember. At exactly 6:30, her doorbell rang with the precision of Swiss clockwork. Victoria opened the door and nearly forgot how to breathe. Marcus stood there in a midnight black tuxedo that looked like it had been crafted by master tailors and blessed by fashion gods. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the kind of presence that made people stop mid-sentence and stare in admiration. A single red rose rested in his hand like a promise of things to come. "You look breathtaking," he said, offering her the flower with a smile that could have powered entire city blocks. "Thank you. You look like you stepped off a magazine cover for billionaires." The Metropolitan Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale dream. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light over round tables draped in cream silk. The city's skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows like scattered jewels against black velvet. Soft classical music filled the air with sophisticated elegance that spoke of serious money and serious power. Victoria immediately spotted Derek near the silent auction display, wearing his best suit and holding court with colleagues from the acquisitions department. He looked confident and smug, exactly as she had expected, her stomach twisted with familiar dread. "There he is," Victoria whispered to Marcus, nodding toward Derek's location. Marcus followed her gaze and nodded once, his expression shifting into something more calculated and dangerous, ready to make him regret every cruel word he's ever spoken about you. They walked into the ballroom together, and Victoria noticed heads turning like flowers following the sun. Marcus commanded attention, without trying. His posture was perfect, his stride confident, and he radiated the kind of success that people naturally gravitated toward, like moths to flame. Victoria! Patricia Sterling appeared beside them, practically glowing with curiosity and barely concealed. Envy, you look absolutely stunning tonight, and who is this distinguished gentleman? Patricia, this is Marcus, my boyfriend. Marcus, this is Patricia Sterling, our CEO. Marcus extended his hand with genuine warmth that seemed to light up the entire room. Pleasure to meet you, Patricia. Victoria speaks about her colleagues with such fondness and respect. Patricia practically melted under his attention. How long have you two been together? 6 months, Marcus answered smoothly, his eyes finding Victoria's with an intensity that made her heart stutter against her ribs. Though it feels like much longer. When you meet the right person, time becomes completely irrelevant. The way Marcus looked at her when he said it made the fabricated story feel dangerously close to truth, like something that could become real if she let herself believe it. The truth exposed. 3 weeks after the charity auction, Victoria's life had transformed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Marcus had become a constant presence, coffee dates that stretched into afternoon conversations, dinners at restaurants she'd only dreamed of affording, and quiet evenings that felt more genuine than any relationship she'd ever experienced. But the nagging questions about his identity had only intensified. His knowledge of corporate strategy was too sophisticated, his connections too extensive, and his resources seemingly unlimited. When he'd casually mentioned having dinner with the mayor the previous week, Victoria knew she was drowning in secrets too large to ignore. The revelation came by accident on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide her life into before and after. Victoria was running late for their lunch date and decided to surprise Marcus at his office address, the only concrete detail he'd ever shared about his professional life. The gleaming 40-story tower on Fifth Avenue housed some of the city's most powerful corporations. When she approached the building directory, her blood turned to ice water in her veins. Blackwood Industries, floors 3540, CEO, Nicholas Blackwood. The photograph beside the company listing showed Marcus's unmistakable face, but the name beneath it read Nicholas Blackwood, one of the most powerful business magnates in the country, worth an estimated $12 billion. Victoria's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and searched Nicholas Blackwood with fingers that could barely function. Dozens of articles appeared. Blackwood Industries acquires tech giant for $8 billion. Nicholas Blackwood named Businessman of the Year, the mysterious bachelor billionaire who refuses all interviews. Every photograph showed the man she knew as Marcus Kane, the man she'd hired for $1,200 to pretend to love her. Miss Hayes? A voice behind her made her spin around like a trapped animal. An elegant woman in her 40s approached, wearing a tailored suit that screamed, "Executive Authority." "I'm Catherine Blake, Mr. Blackwood's executive assistant. He's waiting for you in his office." Victoria felt like she was walking through a dream as Catherine led her to a private elevator that required a special key card. The ride to the 38th floor passed in surreal silence, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of Marcus's deception. The elevator doors opened to reveal an office that belonged in architectural magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while modern art, that probably cost more than Victoria's annual salary, adorned the walls. Behind a massive glass desk sat Marcus, Nicholas, looking exactly like the powerful billionaire he actually was. "Hello, Victoria," he said softly, rising from his chair with the same fluid grace she'd come to associate with him. But now, she understood it wasn't confidence. It was the absolute certainty of someone who owned half the world. "Nicholas Blackwood," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're Nicholas Blackwood." "Yes." "Why?" The word came out strangled, carrying months of confusion and growing feelings she'd thought were mutual. Nicholas moved around his desk, approaching her with careful steps, like she was a wounded animal who might bolt at any sudden movement. "Because when I saw your message on that escort website, I recognized your name. Derek Walsh had been spreading rumors about you to potential clients, including companies that do business with Blackwood Industries. I wanted to meet the woman he was so determined to destroy." Victoria felt like the floor was tilting beneath her feet. "You knew who I was from the beginning?" "Yes. And after meeting you, I realized Derek wasn't just cruel. He was actively sabotaging a brilliant marketing strategist because his ego couldn't handle being rejected. So this was all what? Corporate espionage, a billionaire's entertainment." Nicholas's blue eyes filled with something that looked dangerously like pain. "It started that way. But Victoria, what happened between us became real very quickly. More real than anything I've experienced in years." Before Victoria could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant. "Emergency meeting called. Derek has evidence about your fake boyfriend. Get to the office now." Victoria's face went white as she showed Nicholas the message. "He knows. Somehow Derek found out about the escort service." Nicholas's expression shifted into something cold and calculating. The face of a man who had built an empire by destroying his enemies completely and efficiently. "Then we end this today," he said, reaching for his suit jacket with determined precision. An hour later, Victoria sat in Morrison & Associates' main conference room, surrounded by the entire executive team, while Derek stood at the head of the table with a laptop and a triumphant smile that made her skin crawl. "Ladies and gentlemen," Derek announced, "I've discovered something that calls into question Victoria Hayes's judgment and professional integrity." He clicked his laptop, and a photograph appeared on the wall screen. Nicholas walking into the Blackwood Industries building with CEO clearly visible on the building directory behind him. "Victoria's boyfriend isn't who he claims to be," Derek continued smugly. "His real name is Marcus Kane, and he's a high-end escort she hired to pretend to love her. I have receipts from the agency, photographs, and witness statements proving she paid for companionship to deceive all of you." The room erupted in shocked murmurs and uncomfortable glances. Victoria felt her career dissolving around her like sugar in rain. "Furthermore," Derek pressed his advantage, "this deception shows the kind of unstable, dishonest behavior that makes her unsuitable for client-facing roles. I recommend immediate termination for professional misconduct." Patricia Sterling leaned forward with predatory interest. "Victoria, do you have any response to these accusations?" Before Victoria could speak, the conference room door opened with quiet authority. Nicholas Blackwood walked in, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and carrying himself with the unmistakable presence of someone who could buy and sell everyone in the room without noticing the expense. The entire room fell silent as death. "Good afternoon," Nicholas said calmly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute power. "I believe you're discussing me." Derek's face went from triumphant to confused to terrified in the span of 3 seconds. But you're Marcus Kane, the escort." Nicholas smiled with cold amusement. "Actually, I'm Nicholas Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries. I believe you're familiar with my company. We've been considering acquiring Morrison & Associates for the past 6 months." Patricia Sterling looked like she might faint. Every person in the room suddenly understood they were in the presence of someone who could end their careers with a single phone call. "Victoria never hired an escort," Nicholas continued, his eyes never leaving Derek's increasingly pale face. She hired someone she thought was an escort. In reality, I was investigating reports that one of your employees was spreading malicious rumors about a potential business partner. Imagine my surprise when I discovered those rumors were not only false, but were being used to damage the reputation of one of the most talented marketing strategists in the city. Derek opened and closed his mouth like a fish drowning in air. "Mr. Walsh," Nicholas said, and his voice carried the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Your harassment campaign against Victoria Hayes has cost my company valuable time and resources. Consider this your formal notice that Blackwood Industries will no longer do business with any firm that employs you." In that moment, Derek Walsh realized he had just declared war on a billionaire and lost everything in the process. Victoria watched her tormentor's world crumble around him, but all she could think about was the man beside her who had lied about everything except, possibly, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The question was whether their foundation of deception could support the weight of something real, or if Nicholas Blackwood had just destroyed her heart while trying to save her career. Part 5. Love Beyond Deception. 6 months after the conference room revelation that changed everything, Victoria stood in her new corner office on the 32nd floor of the Morrison & Associates building, or rather, the Blackwood Morrison Strategic Communications Building, as it had been renamed after Nicholas's acquisition. The merger had transformed the small PR firm into an industry powerhouse almost overnight. Derek Walsh had been terminated within hours of Nicholas's dramatic revelation. His career in communications effectively ended by whispered warnings that traveled through the industry faster than wildfire. Patricia Sterling had been demoted to senior advisor, her authority neutered by her poor judgment in supporting Derek's harassment campaign. But Victoria's relationship with Nicholas remained complicated, fragile, built on a foundation of lies that neither of them seemed able to navigate successfully. Yet Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that she was still performing a role, that Nicholas was attracted to the woman he'd created during their fake relationship, rather than who she really was, beneath the designer dresses and expensive jewelry he'd insisted on buying her.